As I was doing some show prep today, I was looking, as I often do, at Twitter, now called X, and I saw a post from my friend Julie Kelly. She posted today that the pledge by the Republican Party to release all of the January 6th videos has been broken. What does that mean? So that's why we have with us the author of Declassified by Julie Kelly, a great Substack. She's also the author of the book How Democrats Use the Capitol Protest to Launch a War on Terror Against the Political Right. Julie Kelly joins us now. Julie, good afternoon to you.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me on.
So what is going on here? I know that the House Republicans did provide you and some other journalists with access to the January 6th footage. Give us a sense of, what you learned. What were some of the things you've learned and where we are now?
So they announced, I believe it was May, that a few journalists, including myself, would be given access to these tapes. And what that means, Vince, is that we were told to go to Washington, D.C., which is fine, meet with House staffers. They then gave us access to terminals with hundreds of cameras and thousands of hours of footage, which is great. So they were very generous in giving us clips and whatever we requested. However, here I thought it would sort of be a temporary fix as they were figuring out a platform to make most of this footage publicly available. So the American people can see what was happening inside and outside the building the day before and, of course, throughout January 6th. But here we are a few months later. That isn't the case. And then they announced a new policy, what I believe another restrictive policy where journalists or nonprofits and defendants, January 6th defendants, can do the same. They can go to D.C., schedule time, look at footage that they need to or want to. They would produce the clips, give that to them, and then they can use it however they want. That's fine, but it's not fulfilling Kevin McCarthy's pledge to make all this footage available to the American people. Here we are now, September. They took over Congress in January, and that is the source of my criticism, that if this were the Democrats, this footage would have been released immediately. And they're still, in my view, not fulfilling their pledge and making this taxpayer-paid video available to the public.
Right. I remember when you first got access to it, you were grateful for that, obviously, as any journalist would be. And you mentioned that you thought it was good that it gave you and some other journalists who are talented at this an opportunity to dig through it and share with the public some of the stuff that you found. But you also told me at the time that you thought that it would be appropriate that it be eventually released in its entirety to the public. That's a pledge you just noted that Kevin McCarthy made. And now with another announcement that, here's a way for other journalists to look at this thing, or January 6th defendants. In other words, they are failing to keep that honor.
That's exactly right. And I did say at the time, and I got criticism too, because Vince, as you know, I've been calling for the public release of these tapes. My first article on this was May of 2021. When we found out that Capitol Police had this trove of video footage, that DOJ has designated it basically classified information, that they were keeping these clips not just away from the American people and Congress, but defendants and their own attorneys. So I was calling for this for 2 years before I was given access. And I did say at the time, yes, I'm grateful to be given access. I do think it's important that journalists at the time who know the subject matter very closely can put footage in context and to protect innocent people. But now we have even more layers, more filtering. And I think that the Republicans have created a political problem for themselves, overly complicating something then that should be very simple. I've seen a lot of this footage. There's no reason to not put big chunks of it on a public platform and let people look at it.
So what is the explanation? What could possibly be the explanation? So is it possible that this is just a massive technological feat that they can't achieve easily to put all of this footage online? Is there something political that's getting in the way? They feel like it would be politically damaging if they were to release all of this? Or is anybody making some sort of national security claim against releasing the footage that they think has merit? Or what's the explanation here?
I mean, I think it's a variety of things. I do think that there's definitely many technical obstacles in making all of it available at the same time on one single platform. because
Right.
I've seen how involved the system is. But that doesn't mean that you can't release it on a rolling basis. As I said, big chunks of video inside and outside the building at key moments, what people want to look at. So my suspicion is, in most cases, Vince, it's always the lawyers who are messing things up. So
Right.
I would suspect that it's probably House lawyers fighting with Capitol Police who believe that this video belongs to them and not the American people. Capitol Police, I believe, are the ones who have probably complicated this, making it much more controversial, as I said, than it needs to be.
It's amazing. So let me backtrack to what you have discovered. So I know you and John Solomon and others had access to this. What did your access yield? What were some of the stories that you were able to lock down?
So a lot of it has had to do with police misconduct that day. I've also did a lengthy piece about an identified FBI informant who was brought into the Proud Boys, who committed numerous offenses on January 6th and still has not been charged. So I've released quite a bit, but I'm only one person.
Right.
And the other journalists who, John Solomon is a very busy guy. He's got a big organization. But we haven't really seen a lot of clips coming out of his news organization either, because as we know, there's so much breaking news all the time. So the idea that I think the test case of giving it to journalists, even myself included, and having us sort of present it to that didn't work. It's not working. And it's simply, as I said, and you just said, not fulfilling that promise to the American people. So I'm hoping that they reconsider this policy, this restrictive policy that they put out, yesterday that I was responding to.
Yes.
The idea that defendants can get exculpatory video, which of course all of it is exculpatory, in their cases and only be able to use it in court proceedings, which was one of the distinctions in this new policy, that should be eliminated. I mean, if a defendant finds video that is exculpatory and they want to post it in whatever platform they want, they should be able to do so.
Yes.
So this is just, as I said, I have suspicions about the complication. It doesn't have to be that complicated. But this is footage that is important as Vince. They continue to arrest people every single day.
Right.
The DOJ, Matthew Graves' office, FBI is not stopping. And what really is enraging people is the human catastrophe that's happening with this prosecution. A 22-year-old boy took his own life last week after he was charged and arrested on 4 misdemeanors. He was 19 on January 6th. He and his family have been tormented by this FBI. He sees what happens to January 6ers, how their lives are destroyed. He's a young man, was a young man, and took his own life rather than be branded an insurrectionist and domestic terrorist for the rest of his life. So this is still ongoing. That's why it's imperative that we see not just the videos, events, all the documents, all the emails, all the records between Capitol Police, Nancy Pelosi's office, D.C. Metro Police, the FBI. This is taking a tragic human toll on thousands of American families, and they're not stopping. So this is the only way we can try to defend the people who are being tormented and destroyed by the DOJ and FBI.
Julie, a moment ago you said that the footage that you and other journalists were provided, it was, that idea was tried, and you said it didn't work. Why didn't it work? What is the explanation? Is it just that there's just so much footage to get through that even a small group of journalists just can't get through all of it? Is it a matter of the quantity?
I think both. I know for me, Vince, there's just so much breaking news all the time.
Yeah.
That we're trying to cover, the Trump indictments and other issues that are coming up.
Yes.
So any journalist is limited in, their ability to cover a lot of things at one time. So I know for me, it's just been a time squeeze as I'm trying to cover these trials.
For sure. And I can tell you, having done this for some time, that in journalism, especially investigative journalism, it's hard to dive into something when you don't have at least a semblance of what you're going to have at the end of your story. So it's hard to dive into it and just kind of feel around in the dark and hope something happens upon you. That's not a good use of your time. So you're reporting on the things that are the sure things as much as possible. But there's a lot of footage here. And so, you've obviously made a judgment now that, man, there's just so much to get through. At this point, we need the public involved in digging through it. Do I have that right?
I believe so. I mean, look, it would behoove me, right, to hoard this footage for myself,
right,
and to selectively release it with my reporting attached to it. But that's not fair. And that's just not in the best interest of the truth and reality, in getting the facts out. And as I said, it's not fair to the descendants and their families who are being destroyed. So I could hoard all the video I have. You know, I've released video about a fence cutter, another guy who was cutting down that snow fencing. He's never been identified. He's never been charged. And this was around the same time that the first breach, you know, it all seems coordinated. So I can keep doing that, and using my own profile and, you know, promoting my own work. But at the end of the day, that's not right. And it's not, you know, what I've been calling for more than 2.5 years. And it's certainly not the promise that Kevin McCarthy and House Republicans made to their own constituents. And it's certainly something, Vince, the Democrats would never do. I mean, we just can't keep playing, you know, by the rules of a game that doesn't exist. So I don't know if that's part of their calculation, just being overly cautious. But that's not how Democrats roll in Congress, and that's not how Republicans should either.
What do you think is going on with Kevin McCarthy? You know, he made a lot of promises to conservatives when he came in, that he would govern as a conservative, that he would, I know we're entering these spending fights, that he would pass 12 clean spending bills. You know, he's floated the word impeachment for multiple Biden officials, to include Alejandro Mayorkas and Joe Biden himself. He made commitments about releasing this footage. But what ends up happening quite often is he either pays lip service to these issues, or he only kind of half delivers. What do you make of his time as Speaker so far?
I mean, I think he's got his hands full. There's no doubt. I think that he has enabled people like James Comer to really dig in and produce what, you know, all of these bombshells with the Biden family. So I think he has enabled a lot of these investigations. But look, the biggest mistake Republicans made, in my opinion, is not forming their own January 6th committee. This is still a top issue. This is going to be the Democrats and Joe Biden's top issue in the 2024 campaign. It's not going away. So the fact that they didn't create their own committee, hold, you know, televised nighttime hearings for everyone to see, haul in these officials, haul in these judges, haul in Matthew Graves, haul in Christopher Wray, all of these top officials who are responsible for this abusive investigation, and exposing the cover-up. You know, at this point, I hate to say it, with a few exceptions to January 6th, Republicans have helped with the cover-up of January 6th.
They want it to go away.
Vince, they do want to go. You know why? And I kind of understand it. What do? You catch a tiger by the tail. You expose the biggest crime perpetrated against the American people that has resulted in the destruction of thousands of lives, political careers, and now, you know, the former president and prospective GOP presidential. What do you do when you really find out what fully happened that day? What do you do? So it's better maybe just to hope that it goes away, even though it's not, or kind of, you know, nibble at the edges.
Well, look, Jim Jordan has this weaponization committee. Has it ever touched January 6th?
They've gotten some good documents and testimony related to January 6th, but I haven't seen any hearings devoted specifically to January 6th.
Right.
Which they should. We should be on hearing, you know, number 5 on January 6th with these officials and with the victims. You know, Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene did hold a hearing with the victims, you know, people whose lives have been destroyed. Jerry Perna, whose nephew committed suicide in February of 2022 after he was told he would spend years in prison for an obstruction plea. It was held off-site, and I still commend them, but it was not, you know, a formal committee structure. And it was held in the Capitol Visitor Center, not in you know, the Capitol building. So there have been a lot of missed opportunities. And I think Republicans are really going to pay a political price because, as you know, Vince, this is an issue top of mind to Republican voters.
For sure.
And if they continue to drop the ball, they are going to pay a price next year.
Yeah, just be confident and forceful. That's all we're asking. It's not that hard. It's just, you know, like this, the kind of the tiptoeing around. Everyone can smell that, and it smells like weakness, and people don't like it. And it's just time to fix the country up. Julie Kelly, thank you for the role that you play in doing that every day. Really appreciate your time today.
Well, thanks for always covering my work, Ben.
Of course, always.